Well, here we are again. Good evening, friends. Whatever time zone it is where you are, I'm Amichai, and I'm excited to welcome you back to our Seder Prep series. This is number 2 of 4. So some of you were with us last week. Some of you are just joining us. Some of you are in the Zoom room, or some are watching this later. But this is our preparation for Passover 2024 that we suspect is going to be different than all other years, as each year Passover is different than all other nights. We're in the middle of a critical and painful moment all over the world. I'm in Jerusalem tonight, and we are curious and cautious about how we will sit around Seder table this coming year with so much pain and sorrow and division, with different opinions and viewpoints, when we come together to lean into liberation and tell this ancient story in which we remember where we come from and hope for better days. How do we do it this year in ways that will honor every voice, that will lift us up and will help us heal step by step? Thinking about this year, we decided to refresh our Seder, SAYDER, read less, say more, and take the 4 questions that we've been working with for quite a few years to make our Seders more exciting and real, and adjust them for this year. Last week, we began and looked at Manishtana. How are we different this year? And how can we bring voices to the table in a compelling way? And tonight we're going to go into the second question, Avadim HAYINU. What is the narrative of enslavement and the narrow places in which we found ourselves and are fighting ourselves again? What stories will we be telling this year, ancient and current, that will help us be part of the redemption that we're all seeking in so many ways? So this is our plan for tonight. I'm really excited to be here with our ritual team, with Cheryl Klein and Ben Freeman, who will get us started in just a moment, and with 2 amazing guest teachers, storytellers, to help us make the night of storytelling one for the ages. I will introduce Jalen and Jar in just a moment, but before we do so, I'm going to invite us to delve into one of the musical tropes of the night, which is Avadim HAYINU. To make sure that we know where we are in the 4 square of our question, Amanda, do you mind sharing for just a moment on our screen what is our overview of the 4 questions that we're offering? This is a PDF that you can download on our website. The link will be in the chat. Again, some of you were with us last week. Some of you are just joining. The first question is Manishtana, how are we different this year? And tonight we're focusing on Avadim HAYINU, how we were enslaved. What do we do with that important and complicated question in so many ways as we think about healing and hurting and liberation this year? Next week, we're going to look at Dayenu, and the week after, into the future. So for now, here we are. Please take a deep breath with me if you are able to. And thank you, Amanda, to bring us back into this moment as we ground ourselves in the privilege of being here together. Thank you for joining us. And I'm handing it over to my brother Ben in our office in New York to get our heart open with the sacred music of this.
Yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai nai nai, yai nai nai, nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai. Many of us may have grown up with this melody, a very minor melody. A melody in a sad tone but one that looks to hope too. And it goes with these words, these classic words, Avadim Hayinu, Ata B'nei Chorin, which classically translated we might say, once we were slaves, now we are free. Let's try those classic words one time before I introduce some new words to you. Avadim hayinu, hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin. Would you be willing to try some new words on this old song tonight with me? If so, I'm going to put some words, or Amanda more precisely will put some words into the chat from Rabbi Annie Lewis, a longtime beloved teacher here at Lab Shul. And the words are this: until we all are free, we are none of us free. Until we all are free, we are never free. It sounds like this. Until we all are free, we are none of us free. Until we all are free, we are never free. Try it. Until we all are free, we are none of us free. Until we all are free, we are never free. Avadim hayinu. Avadim hayinu, ata b'nei chorin, b'nei chorin, avadim hayinu, avadim hayinu, until we all are free, we are none of us free. Until we all are free, we are never free. Until we all are free, we are none of us free. Pass it back over to you, Amichai.
Thank you, Ben. What a beautiful rendition. And thank you for bringing Rabbi Annie's words. So we just want to take a couple of moments to ground ourselves, all of us who are here together. Some of us, as the Haggadah says, even we were all wise and old, and we all know the old story, even then we have to tell the story every year again, because we're not the same, and the story is not the same either. So Shira and Ben, we're going to model for everyone. If you were to think of just the kernel, the essence, the bullseye of what is that story of the Passover that you have on your mind or in your heart this year, what's the essence that stands up for you? Shira, do you want to start? Not a simple question.
It's so funny. I thought we were going to say, what did we grow up with? I go, it was our childhood version of this. So
okay.
in my
So
head,
you can do
no,
that.
it's just, I really appreciate the questions, like what's now, but when I was a kid, I grew up where there was everybody around the table always had a different Haggadah. And the Haggadah that somehow I famously always chose was the Freedom Seder, which was a composition by Rabbi Arthur Waskow and his, renegade friends, and I loved it. And everybody used to laugh because it always has some curse words in it, and I always picked the beat poet, things to read from it, and I really, really loved it. And it definitely, the messaging from the Freedom Seder was exactly what you just sang. This musical edition, until we all are free, we are none of us free, and it was. I remember it really well. I remember the Seder that was the tone of the Seder when I was growing up.
See, and I was going to say, Shira, that in my house growing up, and I don't actually mean just my parents' house. I mean the houses in which I had Seder growing up. It was very much a we story in the smaller version of the we. This is our story. This is the story that belongs to us, about our pain and about our liberation. And it doesn't necessarily look outward. It was a very inward facing story.
Yeah.
And I think this year, in a moment in which my own Jewishness feels so front and center, more than possibly it's ever been in my whole adult life for many different reasons, both beautiful and hard, I'm thinking about the interplay between those different versions of we. So many of our songs, this song included, is written in the plural, in the new. And it's like, which we are we talking about? And I don't want to say that it should be this we or that we alone. I think both we's are important. And I'm just thinking about the tension between them and the interplay of owning the really personal we that Jews have around this story, but using it also to connect to other we's that are in the story too.
Yeah. Thank you both. Briefly, as many of you know, I grew up in Israel. My father, who was a Holocaust survivor, brought that perspective to Seder. Without saying much about it, we knew that when we're talking about being enslaved, that was family trauma. And then went all the way back to the biblical story that for hundreds of years, myth or story or history, the story that isn't really told in the Haggadah but is implied is that our ancestors were enslaved and endured terrible suffering, and through a whole host of resistance with divine help and 10 strikes and Moses and Miriam and frogs and things got out on this full moon night of the Passover, and we survived. Hooray. And growing up in Israel, growing up with a political reality, growing up with historical trauma, it was definitely, as Ben said, a we story. And it took me a while into my adulthood to understand that it's also a metaphor about the internal. And when we say Mitzrayim, the place which is today is perhaps Egypt, is the place of the narrow places. That's what Mitzrayim means. And it's about the inability to actually take a breath on so many deeper levels. So whether it's political or mystical, it's about the journey, the ongoing human journey towards liberation. And so this year, with all these complications we know of, we really need to go back to that story and know that it's going to be about different things for different people. And we are here tonight inviting ourselves to find some common ground of making this a story that will help us be ever more liberated and help others as well in what we hope will be a night of questions that heal and not confrontations that hurt. Right? There's a lot of anxiety around Seder. I'll just name it. We're here because there's anxiety, people asking real questions. Like some of us are pro and some of us are anti, and we have different political perspectives. And in America, the red and the blue, and in Israel, oh my God, how the hell are we going to sit around the table? Stories are there to heal. So we invited storytelling experts to join us tonight. And this is my beautiful moment of honor of inviting an old friend and a new friend to join us tonight. You're going to meet in a moment the creators and the artistic director and the executive director of the Inheritance Theater Project. Some of you from Lab Shul already know the Inheritance Theater Project, and you know John Adam Ross, who's founder and the executive director, a beloved friend, all-time storytelling and Lab Shul founder, artist, brother, dear friend, an amazing thinker about how stories can liberate. And I'm meeting now, and we're so excited to introduce the project's fairly new artistic director, Jalen Livingston, who's joined JAR and their amazing team. You both are from down south, and so you've got storytelling abilities and a lot of passion. And we're going to put your bios in the chat. And before we even introduce you two, we want to introduce the project with a very short clip that Shira will play in just a second. that was recently on PBS, is on PBS now, about Exodus, the project you all are working on right now, which is phenomenal. And then we're going to invite you guys to introduce yourselves and take us into your expertise of how stories shake us to the core. Thank you both so much for being here tonight, for joining us, for all the work you're doing to make this world better and to help us grow. Shira, let's start with a little clip.
Every play is a child, and it takes a village to raise it.
Welcome to the Promised Land.
It takes a village to share it with the world.
We are a national arts organization who go to different cities around the country to make plays based on the history of the place, the people who live there, and the inherited wisdom of the book of Exodus.
When I think of Hampton Roads, I think of diversity, inclusion, and equity.
When I think of Hampton Roads, it's actually the opposite of you. I think divide, I think schism.
That's the dysfunction of our community. We can't agree on anything, and because of that, everybody suffers.
Our job as artists is to take those issues and to elevate them into something that is authentic, beautiful, aspirational, and sacred.
We are the hope they dreamed of. Oh, what a dream I had last night.
I was really
Tough to end that share.
I know you guys want to watch this PBS show. I watched it and I'll watch it again. So links in the chat. Make sure you save it for later. But for now, gentlemen, stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Amichai. Thank you, Shira. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Lamshel, for having us. I feel privileged to be here, and I feel privileged to welcome Jalen, who is one of my dearest friends and most esteemed colleagues, into my spiritual community of Lamshel, which Jalen has not ever had the opportunity to experience before. So thank you for welcoming in my friend, y'all. And thank you for being here. What that clip was from a project that we did in Norfolk, Virginia, and where we were exploring redlining and white flight. And Virginia Beach was founded in 1963 with articles of incorporation that explicitly barred Jews and Blacks from owning property, and the consequences of that are still being felt today, and it's very much an Exodus narrative. But right now, I want to talk to you about a project we did in Cincinnati, and then I'll turn it over to Jalen. We did a project a few years ago in Cincinnati, working with the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which is in Cincinnati, which was the first city north of the Ohio River on the Underground Railroad, the first city in the north, and therefore became a way station for escaping enslaved Africans who were headed north. And we did a project there in partnership with Black community organizations and institutions and partners, and Jewish community organizations and institutions and partners, to conceive of a Juneteenth Seder performance piece, and to devise a piece of theater with the community that would use the structure of the Passover Seder to explore the narrative of Exodus for enslaved Africans from the south to the north. And there were still 10 plagues and 4 questions and all of the structures you're familiar with. But the narrative and the music were those that really highlighted the Black experience in the American slavery escape, if you will. And that project was really impactful on our organization and for the communities in Cincinnati we were working with. And then we got a call about a year and a half ago from somebody in Los Angeles saying that there were schisms within the Black and Jewish communities there, and could we remount the Juneteenth Seder? And we don't tour our work, the Inheritance Theater Project. I'm not going to say much about our work right now, but we don't tour the work. But we brought it to our team, and it was actually Jalen who was able to see a way in which we could tour the process. And start from scratch again. And so Jalen, can I turn it over to you? Could you just share a little bit about what we're doing in LA?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Amakai and Shira and Ben and all of Lab Show for having me. I feel honored to be in your cool space, cool Zoom space. We have been going back and forth from New York to LA since January, I believe. And just to give a little more context, this is the first time we're trying to tour a process, but also the first time we are condensing our process to 6 months. So there's multiple kinds of experimentation that's going on here, but basically we are examining this question of the Black and Jewish and the Black-Jewish relationship, specifically as it relates to the city of Los Angeles, because our work is hyper-local. But of course, there are all of these greater national themes that touch us in wherever we are on the planet that can also be excavated from this kind of very specific regional work. And we've been able to be in rooms with people of multiple generations. We worked with a group called Sages and Seekers, whose mission is around being in multi-generational spaces. We've worked with retirement homes. We've worked with high schools, both Jewish and non. Worked across racial lines, basically putting people in spaces that they feel safe first and engaging with the work through that lens, then moving them into mixed space, what we call brave space with other communities, and continuing to have the kind of conversations that we have on the road here with the Heritage Theater Project. And we're about to emerge into our next part of the process, which is actually making a play with the city itself, going into kind of like a rehearsal, more traditional structure. Because over the past few months here, we've been gathering over 700 words and phrases from Los Angelinos who represent the communities that we are investigating and being in community with, telling us about their experience as it relates to both Los Angeles and Exodus. And so it's been fascinating to see what is true in every single room, and it's been fascinating to see what is not true in every single room, and to know that, you know, tension and divide is not the end of anything. It is just a thing. And that we can choose to go through it or we can choose to be repelled by it. But it has been very hopeful, I think, in the work that we've been doing while we are experiencing the global context of this work, to know that there is always something else, something more, and something new to emerge out of these questions. They're not a waste of time.
I mean, that is exactly how I feel, Jalen, about the Passover Seder itself. We are engaging with an inherited structure of ritual that is guided by questions, and the questions that we ask every year don't change, but we do. So it's not a waste of time to keep asking these questions. Jalen also spoke, y'all, about the intergenerational aspect of our work. And I just want to frame intergenerationality within the context of Avadim Hayinu. Avadim Hayinu is a phrase that allows us to assume having been present in the past, right? We were slaves. We speak as if we were present in servitude and present in Exodus. My father was a wandering Aramean, right? And that is magical and existential. And what does it mean to have been present in the past? What does it mean to be present in the present? And what does it mean to maybe be present moving forward? And I know you'll get to that in terms of square number 4 on the 4-question chart in a couple of weeks. With the Inherited Theater Project, we often think of intergenerationality as making time vertical, so that instead of thinking as what happened in the past is behind us and what happens in the future is in front of us, what if time is vertical? And everything that happened in this location is happening simultaneously, which is why you still feel vibrations when you go to, you know, the Western Wall or the Old North Church or Stonehenge, right? The vibrations of that space, anything that's happened in that space, exists through time, and that that verticality gives us an opportunity to play with our sense memories. So I just want to introduce a concept before we jump into what we're going to do today. In theater, we talk about sense memory as not just the memory of intellectual experience, but the memory of sensorial experience, right? There are 5 senses. What does it mean to remember the smell of your grandmother's kitchen? What does it mean to remember the feel of the fabric on the upholstery on the pew in your synagogue? What does it mean to remember the sound of whatever it is you're remembering the sound of? I'm not going to keep going. The shofar, sure, there you go. But the idea that memories can be informed by our sensations is something that artists use a lot in our evocation of the past. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be playing with sense memory. We're going to do an exercise that Jalen is going to guide us through that will lead us into short breakout rooms where we'll be doing individual and group work. And then we're going to come back together and share. And then we're going to go back into those same groups one more time to work on practical application of that sense memory work into the Seders that you may be hosting or attending. And then we will come back together and share a little bit more. And then we will have time to debrief it and discuss it with Amichai and Shira and Ben and us. That's the trajectory of the workshop. And I really encourage us to invite in the possibility that we may actually have the sense memory of Avadim Hayinu, of having been in the story and not just being aware of the story that gets retold year after year. And we're going to play with what parts of the story we were in, and we're going to play with senses and memories, and I'm going to turn it over to Jalen for that.
Awesome. Thanks for that setup, John Adam Ross. And John, you'll let us know how much time we'll need for each section. So just to define a couple of terms in terms of what I mean when I'm using these words. Theater is the first democracy in my kind of study and view of human behavior, the first place wherein both high and low and privileged and non and oppressed could be in the same space and see the same thing at the exact same time. So theater is inherently political. And also within that, there is the tool of the imagination. And so theater is inherently political meaning how we are together. And theater and imagination is the tool we use to do this event called theater. Then imagination has to be one of the most important political tools that we have. And so when I use these words, I approach it with that kind of context. So when I say imagination, yes, I also mean the playground, but I also mean the revolution, whatever that means to you. I want you as characters within the Exodus narrative to think about Exodus being both a time within an enslaved history, a time breaking out of an enslaved history, and a time of Exodus in the future. And so wherever you most resonate in terms of time, when you think of the Exodus narrative, some people think of it as day one out of Egypt. Some of us may think of it as a coming thing. Some of us may immediately go to the stories of the enslaved in Egypt and the years and years and years and years of slavery. So I want you first to just imagine situating yourself in the continuum of Exodus that you most readily go to when you hear the word. That you most readily go to when you hear the word, to just think about that. And the second thing I want you to think about from that point is a sense, whether it is sight, smell, taste, hearing, touching, but a sense that you feel like you can activate in your imagination. and you will answer a prompt in your group that you will be put out into a breakout group. And in that group, you will share both the place in which you have situated yourself in Exodus, and also what Exodus from that vantage point either looks like, smells like, tastes like, or sounds like. And whatever sense you, right, I'm not great at math, so I'm gonna probably always miss a sense, but I know y'all got me. And wherever you land in terms of those senses, I don't want you to stop at whatever the first answer is to that question. And so I want us to actually take time, and maybe we take even a couple of minutes here, John, I'll let you referee this, but to think of at least 5 answers to wherever sense you land. So if it's smell, what does Exodus smell like in the future? 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 You will answer that question 5 different times. And then when everyone is done answering the question however they would like, you will talk in your small group about the answers you come up with. I think it's really hard to speak to a individual life, and a individual life can be so many different things, but it becomes much more accurate to be able to speak of us as one, as oneness. And so I think through the conversation of how does Exodus look, smell, touch, taste, we as individuals may not be able to capture one life, but we may be able to capture the totality of a life, of life in general, by sharing these senses. We're building a kind of character together, a kind of individual at the center of our conversation that sees and smells and hears and tastes and feels across all of time. And so that's what I want us to share with each other in our small group. Once we do that, I want that small group to decide one of the senses to bring back into the large group to report back on from your group. And I want that to be driven by the sense that you feel is the most important sense to remember this Seder. The sense you feel is the most important sense to remember this Seder. And that'll only come after you all talk to each other and confer and look at your list and all that kind of stuff. I know that's a lot of information possibly, so let's just take a second. We're all gonna make it. We're not in school. No one's gonna fail. I wonder, John, can you just repeat what I just said in your own words?
Absolutely. And also, it's very helpful in the chat. Thank you, Amanda. You're going to choose a phase of Exodus. Exodus, that moment of the story when the Israelites are still enslaved. That moment of Exodus, that phase of Exodus, which is the emergence from servitude. And whatever the continued, or the third phase is whatever the continued Exodus might look like moving forward. Position yourself in that phase. Take a sense. Smell, sight, hearing, touch, sound, listening, and make a list. What does Exodus smell like, taste like, feel like in this moment? 5 answers, 5 things on your list. When you get in your groups, and we're going to go in our groups in 1 minute, just take a minute once you get in your groups to give everybody a chance to write down their 5 tastes or 5 smells or 5 sounds of their Exodus. 5 answers, 1 sense. But each of you may have different senses or the same senses. Then you share with each other, and you pick one thing that one person shared that you're all like, oh yeah, that, let's play with that. Let's play with that for a little bit. That's something that we really want to play with. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to do some more work with it. Y'all, thank you very much for jumping in. And hopefully the prompt is clear. And we're excited to see what comes out of it. You're going to have, I'm going to say you're going to have 8-ish minutes in this breakout room, and we'll come back together at 7:16 or 7:17 to come back together. And you're going to be in breakout groups, I believe, starting momentarily. All right. Terrific. Hey, everybody. Here together, just us. How are you
Shira,
feeling?
do you know how many groups that was?
That was 4 groups.
Okay, cool.
Great.
I feel like we might want to give them 10 minutes, John.
That's fine. We can give them more time. That's a lot to do in 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Amanda, we can give them the 1 minute warning at 7:17 and then bring them back at 7:18.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know it'll automatically give a 1-minute warning just before we want to close it out.
Great. Terrific. Jalen, that was great. Shira, how you feeling?
I was just looking at the groups real quick. This is great. There's like 3 groups of 5. They're actually all groups of 5.
Terrific. That's fantastic. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, I know the number has been fluctuating a little bit, so I figured this is kind of the safe bet.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Wow, y'all. Thank you. I'll stay in here with you in case also we get any like latecomers and we can just move them around quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. How are y'all feeling?
Hey, Rabbi.
Y'all, those beautiful questions. The
taking
sensory.
notes.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my own journaling. Because it is 2 in the morning and I'm jet lagged to the fucking max. We're recording. Well, whatever. And
Oh yeah, let's stop recording.
Hear that,
Got it.
Amichai? All right, Jalen, you'll start this solicitation.
I heard you.
Amichai, did you hear what Jalen said about how to be in the world in a way that isn't in reaction or objection to? I didn't know if you caught that. You're right, Jalen. People needed more time. They're not jumping into the Zoom room until the very last second.
It's kind of an advanced question. Like, it sounds kind of elementary, but then you go work on it and you're like, oh, I could be in here for 30 minutes. Yay, faces. People are smiling. That's a good sign when you come back from a breakout room. Yeah. And yeah, y'all just let me know when that's everyone.
Yeah, we're good. I think we're all back.
We're good. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, let's just like take a few seconds before I even, go into what is the final sentence you came out with in your group, but to just kind of unmic if you want, and anyone can just like share some reflections about just like what that process was like in general for you.
It was great. I'm sure you know this. There's time limitations of time, but it was really short for our group. Like we were just barely sort of orienting and figuring out, wait, did we understand this the right way, or how did we understand? But it feels really good. I mean, I think we were just getting into it, and we did some, but
Yeah. Let's keep processing together. I wonder, John, too. I mean, I know we have a part 2 to this, but I wonder if there's any value in processing this a little bit with everyone and then going back and giving folks some more time to like talk through some stuff. Because I think part 3 can also be something that we, send people off with to think about.
For sure. And the other thing I was going to say is when we go back into breakout rooms, you'll be in the same breakout rooms. So you're going to be back together with each other momentarily. Are there any other sharings about that experience, the process that you want to share out?
I could say something.
Okay. Where are we?
Lori.
Sorry, who was
Lori.
Yeah, I
Great.
was just going to say it was kind of fun and pleasantly surprising that a lot of us came up with very related things, maybe because the story itself is so, there's so much terror in it that we latched onto that, but different facets of it that emerged were really beautiful.
Mm. Did anyone find like people's answers surprising at all, or where people started their story surprising? Harry was not shocked one bit. Harry said, I know these people.
I kind of focused on your requests that we think of a particular sense. And so
Right.
that's what I imagined. And I came up with a particular sense. And I think I was like the only one in the group. Everybody was talking about a general feeling and, an internal tension and feeling. But I focused on a particular sense, of the sense of sound and hearing. So I was kind of surprised that nobody was really resonating with the five senses in particular. That's about it.
Yeah, you want to share more about sound, Laura?
Yeah, I don't know why, because I'm a pretty visual person in terms of how I like to express myself and what I see, what I experience. But I imagined that I would have been kind of I pictured the period when when we were first leaving Egypt, that initial embarking on freedom, and the fear and anticipation and the kind of overwhelming sensation of leaving, and how overwhelming the sounds around me would be. The terror, the fear, the excitement, the babies crying. I just imagine like a cacophony that was overwhelming to me as I was trying to, steel myself to go forward. That's what I came.
That's really powerful. Even just listening to you reflect that back, I get emotional just like thinking about dropping into that event, right? Like the event of sound within that context is just a fascinating thing to put oneself in. And I immediately go, where else have I heard those sounds? Under what other circumstances have I heard those sounds? So thank you for sharing that.
It also makes me think, Jalen, of like there's 600,000 people. Can you hear them coming? And what does it sound like when you hear them coming, right? And how far away are you before you start to hear them coming? And what is that? It never occurred to me in the desert. I always think of the desert as silent. And I think of
right.
The Exodus is trudging silently. And so anyway, that activates me. And I'm going to stop talking because I could devise, but we have a couple of hands in the air. I want to get to them before we move on.
Yeah, I see Beth and Channy, and then Shira, if you want to keep more of an eye on that so I don't miss anything. I don't really trust myself there. But I see Beth and then Channy, and then I'll give it to Shira that keep facilitating this. Beth, you're muted, love.
Beth, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Beth, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that.
There we go. Yep.
So first, I just wanted to add to what Laura said, but first say hello to Laura. I haven't seen those guys in about 15 years. So, oh my God. Hi. So I also was thinking about sound, but so differently. And I thought that was really interesting. I had also chosen in my mind the moment of departure and thinking about like leaving the narrow place and entering a wider place, and therefore the tension that exists in that moment of still feeling the idea that you're enslaved, but also, you're beginning to feel the sense of freedom at the same time. And there's a beautiful tension in that moment, in that departure moment. And when I was thinking about hearing and sound, I was thinking about voices. I was that really specifically, and I was thinking about voices, the voices in my own head at that moment, the voices that are outside, the voices that I'm leaving, the oppressive voices that I'm leaving behind. And it's just interesting how we all sort of approach the ideas so differently.
Internal sound is fascinating to think about. What I think about like what I hear internally may seem silent to you, but it may be really loud to me. And that's really fascinating. Channing, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Beautiful.
Channing.
I'll take pleasure, a quick interpretation. This is Khani. And
Honey, that's so much prettier than what I said.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you all. Our group, I found that we really we took the minute, we all did the thing, and then we came back, and what the group asked was that I read mine when we're debriefing. So is this the time to do that, or are we?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's jump into it.
So it was mud between my toes, sweat all over the body, hunger in my belly, heaviness in my heart, sunburn on my face.
Can you talk us through a little bit of what those words are for you?
It was about sensation, and in the moment before, right? The moment before we know we're free. And it also feels a lot like the moment we're in this moment, in the world, right? Like there is this incredible hunger and heaviness, and it feels like the skin is burnt in some way, right? Like there's so much there. And the feet, I feel like there's no shoes to wear, right? It's like mud between, it's just very sensational in terms of how it feels and is. And also in the moments before we know we're free, we don't know, right? And in that moment, there is no tomorrow. There is this moment of heaviness, of hunger, of pain, of we just don't know the moment before we're free.
What I love about that, honey, and thank you so much for sharing that, is just like when we hear people talk about sound, we automatically start to try to imagine sounds. I think hearing you talk about these feelings, these quite physical feelings in quite intimate places, right? I start to think about how can I touch that feeling? Like, how are we supposed to be in relationship physically to each other right now? What are the ways in which I can stand with no shoes on in the mud with you? I can wipe the sweat from your brow. I can hold your hand. What do you, not you necessarily specifically, but like a general you, what is the you needing to feel from us in response to that image is like kind of the almost kind of angst that listening to that gives me, because it charges me with I want to do now with that information. Thank you.
Wow. I think we have time for one more share right now, and I hope that will be Rona. Did we just lose Rona?
No,
No, I see.
Oh, good. There you are. There you go. Oh, good.
Hello. Yeah, what's funny is that you said, think about the first place that you would go to in the Exodus. And I went where so many other people went. I went right to the edge of the Red Sea, not parted yet. The chariots are coming. And I felt panic. All I felt was panic. And you said, so pick one of the senses and answer that question 5 times. But there was so much panic that I went, I can't pick a sense. I better go somewhere else. And I put myself on the other side of the Red Sea in order to answer that question, and did 5 sounds that I was hearing. But what it made me do is it made me kind of smile and go, oh, well, I guess that's a narrow place, for me to explore this year. So you actually your exercise brought this full circle back to the narrow place for me. So thank you.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and makes me want to ask all sorts of questions about what panic does in your body today. When was the last time you felt panic? Where does that come from? I don't need you to answer any of that, but I mean, it's just those are the questions that come up, these very, very today questions, because your senses are the things that are with you. And so however you hear it in your imagination, taste it on your tongue, feel it on your body, is maybe how you would have tasted, felt, heard. Because what I might hear under that circumstance is different than what you might hear, is different than what you might smell, touch, feel. And so in that way, our senses become these things, these abilities we have to cross time and to really maybe have conversations with ourselves. And so often we're thinking of the other in these stories as something separate from us. But if our way in is as close to us as our senses, then it's about us today as well. I can thank you for sharing that, Ron, and I'll pass it to Shira and John.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Jalen. That was beautiful. And Rona, thank you for sharing. And it's good to see your face. Jalen transitioned us so nicely into talking about today. What I actually want to talk about is 2 weeks from now, which is Passover and the Seders that we're going to be attending or hosting or avoiding. And what we would love to do is invite you back into your groups with a new prompt. You can keep doing the work from before if you feel like that is where your group needs to be right now. And if you have the bandwidth as a group, and this is just going to be our last quick breakout, and then we're going to come back together and bring Rabbi Amichai and Shira and Ben back into this conversation. But we would love for you to select one of the senses that you shared in your groups. One of those sense moments, the mud between your toes, for instance. We would like for you to devise a new Seder element that connects that sense memory, the mud between your toes, for instance, for the Seder. Identify perhaps an object that you could add to the Seder table to represent that sense memory. A new ritual that could incorporate that object and activate that sense memory. Name the ritual, right? All the rituals of the Seder have names. What would you name that ritual? And this is just an exercise for you to do in your group to translate this sense memory work into what already is a sense memory ritual, where the salt water is the tears and the haroset is the mortar, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to invite you to go back into your groups, to pick a sense memory, and to translate it into a new element that you could bring to your Seder. And we're going to have 9 minutes for this breakout. We'll be back at 7:41.
We're going to sing a little bit more of the song that we sang at the beginning, the old one and the new one. Yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai 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 nai. Until we all are free. We are none of us free until we all are free. We are never free. Avadim Hayinu. Avadim Hayinu. Ata b'nei chorin. Avadim Hayinu. Ata b'nei chorin, until we all are free. We are none of us free.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Wow, thank you. John, Jalen, where do you want to take us?
I'll pass it to John.
Hey, thank you all. Thank you for jumping into this, to these rooms. And I'm loving what's in the chat. We talked about adding a conch shell to listen to the sound of the crashing sea, and also to remind us to listen to one another. That's beautiful. Our ritual is the beat, feeling the stones, This is beautiful. Can we get one or two shares of just something that came up in your group that you want to share with the rest of the group? Lori, that's beautiful. Thank you. The beat equals a heartbeat, a beat, beating, taking a beat. Anybody else have anything to share that you came up with in your group or that you talked about?
If I can, I would just quickly share. It was the one member had the thought of what it would be like to feel the stones while emerging from the Red Sea under their feet. And another member brilliantly connected also that we already have salt water on the table. So could we just put some stones in that salt water and have people either in their individual bowls or if they're sharing, put their hands in the water and feel the stones?
Wow.
One thing that came up in our group was the adding a fence to the service when you want to flee. And you cannot, whether it's, blocking you, trapping you. Yeah, trapping you, which you have to say.
Trying to get around it in all different ways to get freedom, but you keep getting blocked. It's like all the plagues and what's going on in Gaza, that people can't get out, they can't get anywhere, the migrants can't get in and get out.
What blocks the exodus?
Yeah, we're locked in and then personally locked in.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Really, really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it. I got visited.
Hello,
Hey,
Susan.
Jar, thank you for modeling the multi-generational approach to Seder. While your kid is here, I want to say that I'm looking around who's with us in the Zoom room, and I know that some of us are parents and some of us are grandparents and some of us are children, and whether we're going to be hosts or whether we're going to be guests, there is this tactile, sensory ways of bringing the story to our Seder tables that, like Andrea mentioned, like we've inherited. There are bowls of tears on our Seder plate. They're not there just for decoration, right? In this year, God knows. And there are all these tactile ways, some of them feel more appropriate than others, that we have at our disposal to ask this question and to bring it to the senses. And what I'm struck by our experience this night, and I shared it with our little group just now, is that one of the things that I've always knew and thought of, but never thought of in this context, is that, if I'm not mistaken, the only physical description of the physical hardship that the Israelites had while being enslaved was that they were short of breath. They couldn't even hear Moses. They couldn't hear the possibility of another option because they were in it. That's all they knew. And they literally could not breathe. They were short of breath, which is a translation. Kotzer ruach could also be they were dispirited, right? The word ruach, as those of us in lab shul know, is the word for breath, but also the word for spirit. And so they just couldn't breathe. They were working so hard. They couldn't stop. They didn't get a break, but also their spirit was crushed. So what will it be like to bring a breathing exercise into the place of the narrow places at our Seder in a way that feels like it's in our body, like this memory is in our body. When we know what it's like to experience the horrific of oppression and not enabling people to breathe, right? We know how resonant that is. So I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but I'm grateful for this conversation. Yeah.
It does make me think of oh, sorry, I was just gonna say it just makes me think of a rope. And when we knot that rope, there's something about just visualizing the tension of knotting a rope over and over again. That's just the image that came to me when hearing you talk about that rope.
I'm wondering if we could just talk for a few minutes about like how to bring this into our Seder practice. So many, all the Seder's a little bit different. you mentioned rope, and that is, the experiential educate, the invitation, to really be and do something, be in the body. And it is occurring to me that, like, we often add a new item to the Seder plate in a current year to symbolize, like, where are we at, and in this example you bring, Jalen, it makes me think we bring a rope, and that may be very specific, but there's an invitation on the table to actually bring an object, and that gets passed. It can be passed around. We can use object theater as well. But I would love for the two of you, if you can speak for a minute. It's like, how do you imagine that we can bring this into our practice with our guests?
I mean, I'll jump in first, which is to say that there's a version of this where you make the decision ahead of time. You're the host, and people show up to your Seder, and hey, there's an object on the table. Let me frame it for you when we get to the moment where that object becomes resonant for me in this telling of the story, in the Agadah, in the Magi, right? There's another version of this where you do the exercise. There's a version of this where what moment is resonating for you, and what is your sense memory of that moment? When we say Avadim Hayinu, when we say, going back to that prompt of we were enslaved, when you say that, what is your memory of that experience? What is your inherited memory, your inherited sense memory of that experience? And if it's not on the table right now, what would you add to the table to represent that memory? And using that as a go around, using that as a prompt. So it could go both ways in terms of what you decide ahead of time is your own evocation, or opening up for the room, the people who are there, to share theirs. And it could also be both, but that's the first thing that strikes me. And I'll add one more thing, which is to connect the breath to Ben's music, which is, and to what Laura was saying earlier about the deafening sounds, is this is the raw version, right? But I remember being a child and making a rainstorm with my friends, where you're going to do this with your hands, and you're going to go shh, and you're going to do this on the table, and you're like, make it right. You're making the rainstorm. And what might it be to make the cacophony and then to eliminate it, have the silence, and just sit in the kotzer ruach moment of it all and breathe and do a breathing exercise, but to do it in relationship to the cacophony, in relationship to the sound. So Amichai, and what you had said, that gave me this idea, and I wanted to share that out. It's just, I think that breath is powerful. I think a breath in relationship to input and overwhelming input is the contrast in that can also be really evocative. Jalen, I don't know if there's any ritual ideas that are coming to you, or anything that this makes you think about from the Juneteenth Seder work we're doing, or from your own ritual experiences in your life. But if there's something that comes up for you, I'd love to hear it.
Just all I would offer that is also informed by the work that we've been doing in LA is to continue to try to make time as manipulative as you can, because so often these categories of past and future feel so distant. And so the senses bring them to the now, while also being able to hold the context in which they live. And it's that complication that all of this brilliance is going to come out of. And so I have no thought about some final item or a final actual task, but that whatever the lens of your imagination that you use, that you try not to be captive to kind of our man-made definitions of what time is supposed to do, and to use that as an excuse to not actually immerse oneself.
Thank you, Jalen. That's really bringing us back to the notion of the vertical time. And really, Passover is that, like all holy days, all rituals. I was just earlier this evening at a Ramadan moment because we're now entering the last days of Ramadan, which is about the revelation of Quran, and people sitting with Greek Orthodox Christians for whom this is Holy Week, right? And like the notion, and in Jerusalem, like living it like here, time is tangible. I want to take a moment before we start wrapping, y'all, to just share on the screen, Amanda, the guide, the PDF that we have for y'all to look at with the possibility of how and when to integrate these questions, these sensory invitations into your own Haggadah. And as we discussed, right, this is the first one that happens at some point at the beginning of Seder. You're going to ask what's new, but then we're going to move to the second question, which is Avadim Hayinu. And here's just like to show you what's on this page. The text, we were enslaved by the Pharaoh in the land of Egypt, redeemed by divine might. That's from the Haggadah. What stories of collective hardship are we bringing to the Seder table this year? What parts of the Passover Seder would you want to highlight as we wish to transform from hurting to healing? And again, I'm inviting us to think about 2024. This question fits best, and this is a host note, whether you're going to be a host or whether you're a guest who want to reach out to your host and say, I've got this resource, this is something I might want to discuss. Do we just want to read the Haggadah, or do we want to come up with some other places for us to talk? So here's just our proposal. This question fits best during the Magid section of the Haggadah, the main attraction. Before diving into the second question, reframe the Exodus story in under 3 minutes, like we did today. What happens there? Either you can do it or be done by collaborating storytelling. Ask people, let's just go, let's just tell it, but not assume that everybody knows it. Get on the same page, and then think about what is the metaphor. What are we working with this year? The Exodus story is often read in religious, historical, national contexts, as we heard Ben describe earlier. It can also be seen as a human metaphor for personal, universal redemption from oppression, slavery, restriction on the journey towards more liberation, opportunity, and autonomy. In each generation, we are invited to imagine ourselves as though we ourselves were enslaved in Mitzrayim, the narrow places, sometimes translated as Egypt, and celebrated our liberation. What aspects of this story do we want to imagine this year? What lessons can we learn from this history to better guide us today and tomorrow? Invite a hefty conversation with support from Haggadah text, people's own experience. Exhale a lot. There you go. There's breath work right there, because this too is how we are liberated from the narrow places within. So this is yours to use to reimagine and where and how fits into your Haggadah. For kids, for grown-ups, for all ages, people with different experiences, this conversation will be helpful. Thank you. And I think we'll share all the other links. They're also on our website. And so we're going to start wrapping this up. I'm sure I'm going to hand it over to you to help us close tonight with deep gratitude to our master storytellers. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen, for your deep insights. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to say good night, and I'll see you next week. Same time, same place. And Shira, please help us close this beautiful night.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you. Last week, Amichai and I had this moment. We realized, okay, we're bringing table makers, storytellers, healers, and futurists, and we separated them out like that. But now I'm feeling like no, everyone's everything, and that's what I'm learning again and again. Thank you, y'all. This has been a major honor, and I really can't think of a more critical use of the imagination in this moment. So thank you. I will tell us a little bit about what's coming next week, which is that we'll be in the scope of HAYINU. So I'm going to put some fun links into the chat of who we're bringing. And Amanda, you can relieve Jalen and John from being spotlit for this if you want to take your own breath. But next week we have Joe Kent Katz, who works specifically in the field of breaking trauma cycles. And HAYINU is the word for enough. it means enough. It's like, what do we need to do to change the stories that we're telling and to help ourselves in this time? So I'm very honored to bring, you scroll up a bit to get those. But there's a couple links in here if you want to visit what Joe's work is before we meet her next week. And also we'll be joined by a very special artist that many of us at Lab Shul have spent the last couple of years with, and that's Rebecca Goldsmith, who will be doing a sonic, somatic sound grounding to start us off. So I'm really excited about that. Amanda's put in the guide that Amichai was just showing. Please download it. There's also a one-pager. Thank you. This is the PBS video is also in here. And at the very bottom is the upcoming events. We will have Sabbath Queen. And, you know, the question for Sabbath Queen this month that's coming up in just a couple weeks is really on our journey. Before we leave to go on this journey, can we locate ourselves? Where are we here now? How'd we get here? What are we doing here? So the map in time will be present, tense, past, and on its way to future. So please join us at Sabbath Queen to come locate ourselves in music and story and wisdom sharing. Children are also invited. Family Lab is on its way. John, we're getting you to Brooklyn with Jamie to make matzah this year. And of course, there is a contemplative practice that is on offer by Louis Burgos. It's called Glow Up, and it's coming up as well. So a huge thanks to Amanda, our moderator, and thank you, everyone. We're going to play that music that we were playing at the beginning, so we have a couple minutes to, tag each other in the chat, wish each other golden dreams, and let's stay in touch. Thanks, everyone.